Conservation Advisory Council is a volunteer group, and we advise the village on all sorts of conservation matters, and we also run the Earth Day, the daffodil plantings, the vine cuttings, and now we're doing
Summerfest.
Oh, Summerfest, thank you. There's one other one that I forgot, which I can't think of. But the exciting news is that we just started a garden club, a Croton Garden Club.
Yippee.
Not the Garden Club of America type thing, more of a community-run garden club. And Richard Zumbach is the head, what shall I call you, the head padrone of this thing.
The head gardener.
The head gardener. And so he's looking for people to help him. So just 10 seconds or 20 seconds.
10 seconds. I'm part of the
We're
CAC.
counting.
I'm part of the CAC. And actually I became part of the CAC because I wanted to kind of promote beautification of the village of Croton. And just recently, or in this spring, we formed the Croton Village Garden Club. And the emphasis of the garden club is basically to identify, street corners, gardens, medians, whatever, that could need some help from a gardening standpoint. Flower garden, not vegetable garden, but flower garden.
And shrubs.
And shrubs, yes. Landscaping and flower gardens, I guess, to make Croton a more attractive place. The municipality has not maintained a number of gardens, and we are trying to kind of take them over and rehabilitate them, as well as create new gardens. So we've had a couple of meetings. We're getting organized. Our next meeting is this Thursday, typically at the library here, 7 o'clock. Typically, our normal schedule is the third Thursday of the month. Okay? Again, here at the library at 7 o'clock. So if you'd like to join us, everyone is welcome. We're very informal right now. We have one garden that we've rehabilitated, and it's down at Croton Landing. So if you want to look at what I think is a very nice garden, it's at Croton Landing at the end of the parking lot. We are going to work on the train station, various locations around the train station, various locations in Harmon, including the Benedict Avenue Circle and other areas. Riverside Drive could use some help. And there's a number of different locations in the village that we've kind of targeted and we'll start working on. It's definitely a work in progress. Will take, I guess, years to accomplish all that I'd like to accomplish, but at least we've started. So if you see a nice garden in the village, it probably is a result of the Croton Village Garden Club. So if you're interested, please join us.
And if you want to ask Richard questions, he's here, come at the end. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening. Margaret, how do you say your last name?
Meden.
Meden.
Yes.
And she's takes care of hives for various groups, and she does it herself. And
I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I love talking about bees. The bad news is we only have very little time. Who is a beekeeper tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all right, wonderful. Because talking about, so I will try to fit everything in, which is a challenge. There never is enough time. And focus. My personal passion tonight is, we'll see where it leads us. Because I really would love that we have enough time at the end for beekeepers to ask questions. The one thing is, every beekeeper will tell you, is there is not one beekeeper ever knowing everything, even if you have done it for 40 or 50 years. There's always a new area that absolutely is fascinating. And my main fascination is that it never ends of new information or new facts in beekeeping, in the scientific world, or the spiritual world. So it's an endless topic. So we'll start with a slideshow, And then I'll go into some kind of new research that's been done that's very, very fascinating, not only for beekeepers, but in general. And I'd like to start with a poem. And now you ask in your heart, how shall we distinguish that which is good in pleasure from that which is not? Go to your fields and your gardens, and you shall learn that it is the pleasure of the bee to gather nectar of the flower, but is also the pleasure the flower to yield its nectar to the bee. For the bee, a flower is a fountain of life, and for the flower, a bee is a messenger of love. And both bee and flower, the giving and receiving of pleasure is need and ecstasy. Oh, wonderful. And now we can light the candle. Yes. The reason beeswax candles are so amazing and so special is because the wax bee is the bee that emerges from the cells. That wax bee, this is a challenge, never sees the light. So the wax bee is the one who makes the hexagon without ever seeing the light. And in return, giving us the light in the winter, because beekeepers get it in the winter. All right. So even beekeepers know life cycle, and we're not going to be able to cover everything, obviously, but some of it. So there's 2,000 different species of bees. Our lovely paper wasp down below is at work right now. The left one is the Carpenter bee. The Carpenter bee does not have a stinger, and I do teach beekeeping also in pollination groups and for children. And I find it very important because the Carpenter bee is an important pollinator. The one on the right is a leafcutter bee, which makes his nest in leaves, eats leaves, is the main pollinator for the almond trees in California, and it's the only native bee to California. Hornet, and of course, kids always like to know about the killer bee. There we have pollen coming in. This is actually a Croton intern. She loved to take pictures. So after you clean the frames, after you take the honey out, the best way to keep them clean is give it back to the bees. And they literally eat up the honey in about an hour. These are the new type of hives. The main hive is called the Longstrauth, and it's over on the table. It's a miniature one. It's developed over 100 years ago, and it's really not the best for the bees because they have no room. The natural form of what a honeybee likes to do is more this kind of shape. And they're called top hive bars. And here that's one of the jobs we have to do is hive cleaning. Skeps is where people used to keep bees. And I heard, skeps are used in Europe, but I heard in the US they're not allowed. They're much, much lighter, and they're made out of straw. And the bees naturally go in and do their thing, and so people move them around in the winter. I would love to get into skeps, but it'd be a little challenge. This is called aconite, and it's the first flower in the early spring. So if you have bees and they come back with bright orange pollen, it's because of aconite. It's a flower that dies back, so we only see it in early spring and March. And of course, this is powerful. Pollen is the only food that the bees feed to their young. So the nurse bee only brings pollen to them, and pussy willows are one of the most amazing ones, and she's totally covered in pollen. Honeybees have an internal comb built in, so they'll constantly brush their pollen down into their basket. And for the ones who don't know the life cycle of the honeybee, in a hive regularly there's about 20,000 worker bees, one queen, and about 500 drones. The worker bee is the only one who works. Sorry, males ones in here. The drones are also called the do-nothing drones. They literally don't collect, they don't have a stinger, they don't collect nectar, they don't do much, but they're very important. They're on standby. Standby for the queen. If they have to make a new queen, They have 500 drones, and about 10 of those get to mate in a flight once in a lifetime. So, and here's lilac, which the pop is a pollen. So here's the queen. How many don't know? I don't want to bore anybody with the life cycle. Does any? Okay, all right, okay, all right. So the queen lays about she's a lot bigger. There's a picture of her. Hold on. There she is, right in the middle. She's a lot bigger, has a long abdomen. She lays between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day. She mates once in her lifetime. She flies 600 feet high up into the sky towards the sun. The drones racing behind her, and that's it for the rest of her life. She never ever goes outside again, and she lays 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. The life cycle, life cycle is about 21 days. The bees themselves only live about 6 weeks. She can live up to 4 years if she's healthy. But not, here they're drinking honey, and you see their proboscis. In this picture over here, what's happening right now in the spring, you have to check your hive on a regular basis to see if there is another queen cell. A queen cell is built only vertical, where all the drone cells are horizontal. So it's quite fascinating. The queen is not in charge of ever deciding who the new queen will be. She lays her eggs. The hive together as a whole decides we're running out of room, our DNAs, we need to have a new queen. The queen is getting too old, she's not laying enough eggs, and then they literally feed particular cells 3 or 4 royal jelly. Royal jelly is very complicated. It's made I still don't know exactly how it's made, but it's made in the brain, and that's how you make a queen. Now, half of the hive will take off, and we've had beautiful swarms last year. This year, I haven't seen too many. So half of that's called a bee swarm. So the old queen is in the middle of this big basket, football size, and they cling on, and then they send scouts out to find a new hive. Back at home, they leave half of the worker bees with queen cells, which are about to hatch, and then you get 3 new queens, and then 1 survives because they have to have a little match first. So, but it's having a queen is crucial, because if there's no queen, the entire hive dies. But I find it fascinating that everything is decided together as a whole. So there's no ever one ruler who decides what they're going to do. And the same goes for finding food. When bees are sending out, I'm sure everybody has heard of the Waggle Dance. It's a figure-8 dance. They go by the light, and they're out of food, dry summer, so they can travel up to 2 miles. And on their way back, they literally do a dance, but not one bee, but there are several dancers. And then the group as a whole will decide which dancer they like the best, and they go, okay, I'll take that flower. And the figure-8 is literally a dance directed to the sun to tell them, go left by Dunkin' Donuts, take a right at the oak tree, and you'll find the flowers. So it's quite fascinating. And here's more. Now, Jan knows tons of wonderful flowers, and that's a whole topic on its own. Our pollinators are absolutely crucial. This year, there's actually Pollination Week coming up, June 24th, and pollination this year is in all the news. So echinacea is a good one where we are. This is her abdomen. Stingers. The honeybee only has 1 stinger compared to the wasp or the hornets, and their stinger is a bit crooked, so it cannot pull back in. So when you get stung by a honeybee, her whole lower part of the abdomen ribs out, and you see it, and that's why she dies right away. And they do not like to die, so therefore they don't like to sting easily. And there's lots of pollen. One bee produces a half a teaspoon of honey in her lifetime. It's quite amazing. So honey is basically bee spit because she collects nectar, churns it up in her stomach and spits it out. The fascinating part is that they literally sit over the honey, flap their wings at, however long, until the honey, until it's reduced to, I forgot the percentage. Do you know, John? 19%?
17.
Yeah, 17% liquid. So it's amazing because if they wouldn't do that, the honey would run right back out because it's nectar. So they have these amazing abilities. Hexagons. There was an Egyptian mathematician 2,000 years ago who said the hexagon is the strongest architectural shape. And then a lot of people and just now I saw an article, they agreed, which is fascinating. The other fascinating thing about wax, it has a melting point of 140 degrees. It never got anywhere in the world is it 140 degrees. But how did the bees know that it didn't melt at 110 degrees? Because their hives should, my entire home just melted away. So it's quite amazing. Oh, and here's our Croton Bee Beekeeper Association. This is actually at your hives, right? In Ossining, yeah. Yeah, so we have a beekeeper group in Croton, very relaxed, but we go to each other's hives and learn together. Like I said, you're never ever done learning, and it's always interesting. You always learn something new.
Do you have to buy that outfit?
Yes, you do. Even though you don't, a lot of beekeepers work without gloves. Gloves is not, sometimes you feel better. But the hood is, I do take that seriously. It's not fun in the face. It hurts. And so this is the brood. This is how it looks right now in the hives, hopefully. So you see the larva, and they feed the larva pollen, and then they cap it over, and after 21 days, she just crawls out and bites her way through. Here's a lovely honey pool. Up, crawling out. Any kind of herbs, if you like to plant herbs are deer resistant. Sage right now, they're covered with any kind of herbs. Hyssop, anise hyssop, they love. Thyme, sage. And the wonderful thing about honey is whatever the bee goes to, wherever the bee goes to, it will take those properties off the plant into the honey. So not only do you eat honey, but you're getting thyme oil with thyme. The only honey you don't want to eat is oleander honey. In the Mediterranean, that was the only one that's not good to eat. Goldenrod is our main plant in the fall around here. They love goldenrod and asters. So they need food literally from early March to as long as they can get it. Hyssop is a good plant. This is propolis. It's a good, and I have it over there. Please go ahead and smell it. Propolis is honeybees are the only ones who make propolis, and they make it from the resin of pine trees, and they mix it with the gooey substance that is peonies. If you watch peonies right now, they all have these little ants crawling all over. That is because the ant is helping them take off the sap. But honeybees also like the sap. So they mix it with the resin and there's many different ingredients, and this is why honey lasts a lifetime. Honey can last up to 3,000 years. They found it in the tombs, even though they had to be careful because this is a little morbid, but they also preserve people whole in honey. So all of a sudden you found a little human in there. So they used it also for mummification. Yes, the peonies have that little gooey substance why they can't open. They need an ant first. It's a symbiosis. You always find ants. So they also like the little sappy substance that keeps the flower bud closed. Yeah, which is wonderful. So a few years ago, I started making salves, mainly for the reason of the propolis, because I'm fascinated with propolis, and my daughter did science research with propolis, So, and it is a antifungal for their hive. They're making it to keep themselves clean. A bee never ever goes to the bathroom in the hive. She waits till it's about 50 degrees and then does her cleansing flight outside. So it's really quite fascinating. But if we can ingest it, we can eat it. Stomach aches goes away, toothaches goes away. It has been used for hundreds of years. But if you use it in salves, it makes the salve last for 3 years without chemicals. So I'm basically going back to the old-fashioned Burt's Bees, which doesn't exist anymore. Spring and fall honey. The left to the right is spring honey. So spring honey will be your apple blossoms, all your fruit right now. It will be your maple tree, and then in the fall is much more a mixture of whatever they got in the summer plus goldenrod. Now I'm not sure if I'm right in this, but recently I thought about allergies. Whenever so many schools, everybody has allergies, and we all know local honey should help. But I wonder, and I'm just wondering, if we then have to eat spring honey, meaning the honey you buy right now from a local beekeeper most likely is the honey from last year, which is the fall. So if you have allergies, I really would encourage you to ask a beekeeper, say, let me know when you have spring honey. Spring honey we don't get very much. It's very little because it's a very short opportunity.
And it's darker?
No, the spring honey is lighter. So if you have spring allergies, it makes sense to eat spring honey. But if you have an allergy to ragweed or goldenrod, you have to eat fall honey. I'm not sure if I'm right, but it kind of makes sense. Oh, and these are all the lovely facts. Oh, mead. I want to talk about mead for a second. You like mead? I'd love to. My daughter tried it once. It didn't taste good yet. But mead, recently I really got into the ancient history of bees. And mead at one point was payment. You paid everything with mead. And one time in a European city, there were 40 meat factories in one city. Honey was used for weddings. That was a wedding gift. Every bride got at least 12 jars of honey for good luck. So there's amazing, lovely folklore and especially around mead. Oh, this is a lovely swarm. So, and beekeepers, the way to get a swarm is you literally take your hand. They're the most docile in this stage because they're haven't eaten honey. They're protecting the queen in the middle. So if you do witness a swarm on a mailbox in Croton anywhere, do not be afraid and just call a beekeeper. They're very happy to come right away and get it for you. And the way to get it is you just take a little box and you put them in there and you hope to find the queen, and then everybody follows. And then your beekeeper has a new hive. A shoe, well, a little bigger than a box, yeah. Well, yeah. Don't try it yourself unless you've done it before. Yeah. But swarms are good. Swarms are good for the hive. So for a long time, I used to believe I did something wrong when they swarmed. And it sounds like a science fiction. They gather probably in a space like this, outside, very loud. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing takes about 10 minutes. And one of my first swarms, I called John Bernard. I said, what do I do? What do I do? He said, nothing. Pull up a chair and watch it. And that is what I tell people. It is so amazing and beautiful. And then they hover, and they're exhausted. And then they send out a few scouts and say, where can I go? And most likely a hollow tree, sometimes an old house. If you're unlucky, a new house and under the siding, that can happen too. But they're not there. And if they do go in the woods, they're still doing their job for the winter, which is pollinate, but most likely they won't make it through the winter. I read in Europe the first beehives were actually made out of cow dung, and then later they had the beehives in the woods in hollow logs. So the bees were beehives all over the woods just in hollow logs. That's how they kept them. And bees like to be in hollow logs. So this is a close-up. Oh, I thought she was going to come. See, this is to show that you don't have to be afraid. So there we cut down the branches. This was quite hard. We actually had to cut down the tree. Now we tried this. This is something that was done in old England in the times, is you play the drum. The frequency of the drum is calming them and telling them to go back. If anybody's dealing with swarms, I've been very successful, and I think that was also John's or some advice, is you know when, as a beekeeper, you will know when they're about to swarm. You can feel it, you can hear it, they sound differently, and then you quickly take off the super and put it sideways. So you're kind of making an X. So you lift the super and put it the other way, and they'll be confused. And it really worked for me. They'll be confused because they do not want to be exposed to light. Their instinct is to, oh, let me fix all the holes here. So, and then they forget about leaving. So that works, but most likely nothing works. So this one, is we caught the swarm and put it in a little hive, and then the drum really seemed to help to just get them back.
So you have another box ready when you're...
Well, this was lucky. Somebody actually happened to have a mini hive. Most people don't have an extra mini hive. So then you can use that green recycling bin. That will work too. And keep them dark for one night. And then the next morning they kind of calm down, and you'll have a new hive for them. They'll be very happy. There's many ways to catch swarms. People have different ways. If people ever get a swarm inside a house, there's also beekeepers who have a vacuum cleaner. And you suck them up in a vacuum cleaner, and then you release them, not like discard them.
What kind of frequency do you want with the drum?
What kind of frequency?
Yeah, low pitch or high?
It was a low pitch. It was a low pitch and a slow beat. A slow beat. Yes, good question. This is just, I love this because I would love, and maybe in Croton in gardens, I would love to see this. I would love to build my own. This is in Europe at many, many places you find them. This is basically a structure for bees. Now, we don't have wild bees anymore, I believe, but carpenter bees could go in there. Other critter, dragon, who knows? I don't know how dragonflies lay their eggs, but this is to encourage bees, mason bees. That's where you have the brick. Hollow, you can use hollow logs or elderberry, anything that's hollow, red currant sticks, and make your own just to encourage pollinators in your garden. So it would be awesome to build these.
That's the most popular thing right now in Chelsea's flower show in England.
Really? It's these? Oh, but look at this. It's a bamboo stick. And then in the bamboo, you just stick other smaller bamboo, and you're done. And it doesn't cost much of anything, and it's not that much work. And that was that. Now, I would love to talk about briefly about last year. They actually came to me in two swarms. I had two swarms 15 years ago, and I knew nothing about bees. And I opened the penny saver, and this nice man from Somers, don't have his name, nothing, came over with his old boxes. I don't think he even had a veil. He had nothing. He used his hands and just swooped them down, put the lid on. He goes, "Here, they're yours. See you later." And of course, they didn't make it through the first winter because I was too afraid. So it took me a while, I have to say, it took me a while. And beekeepers are wonderful. They all help each other, and I definitely have gotten help too, and learned more, sometimes through mistakes, as I go on. And